Okay, so hello, we're here for another chat today. So some people might have seen our rape culture video that we did previously, which we will put a link to where on YouTube, in the description somewhere. We'll put a link to that. But today we're going to be discussing a topic that's related to rape culture that we didn't really get a chance to go into last time, and that is toxic relationships. Just to take a step back from that, though, we'll reintroduce ourselves for people who didn't watch the last video. So Cindy, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah. So hi everyone, I'm Cindy van Wyder. I'm a Belgian writer, especially in young adult fiction and in fantasy. And I met Lucy a few years ago already through Twitter. And from there on, we became very good friends and very good also, acquaintance through writings and through critiquing each other's texts. So yeah, here is the reason for my presence today. And pardonnez mon français, pardon my French, I say. Okay, let's go to Lucy.
Thank you, Cindy. Yeah, so I'm Lucy A. McLaren, YA fantasy author as well. My debut book is coming out in May this year. And yeah, like as Cindy said, we met on Twitter a few years ago. I think we connected over like a love of like fantasy stories, sharing each other's work, but also I think we have like a shared passion for topics like this that we're discussing today, and like the importance of them, and could probably go on for hours and hours about them, but we'll try and rein that in. But yeah, so that's kind of how we've ended up here. Like we both feel like these are important topics to discuss as writers, and as people that want to include them in what we write and what we read as well. So if we start then by defining toxic relationships. So I found a definition that was penned by Dr. Lillian Glass, who's a psychologist who wrote a book called Toxic People in 1995. And she defined a toxic relationship as any relationship between people who don't support each other, where there's conflict and one seeks to undermine the other, where there's competition, where there's disrespect and a lack of cohesiveness. So that's kind of a definition that I found. I personally feel like toxic relationships are being recognized more and more in terms of, yes, there's sometimes domestic abuse and violence in them, but that's not always the case. So I think there's kind of that line in terms of there was a point where it was just if there was physical violence, people thought a relationship was toxic. But we're beginning to recognize more and more that actually there's the psychological aspect, there's a manipulation, there's a coercion aspect, which I think takes us on to another definition that we wanted to go over, and that'd be gaslighting. So did you want to kind of discuss that? Because I know that's something that you brought up yourself when we were going over this.
Yeah, I thought of gaslighting as soon as you proposed to explore the theme of toxic relationship, because I don't know why this movie stayed in my head, it stayed in my mind long after I've watched it. I think because the manipulation, as you say, the coerciveness to which the woman is subjected in this movie. It's kind of an old movie. It stars Ingrid Bergman, so yeah, it's not. It's really not recent. But the manipulation she is the victim of is really chilling, you know, and it's kind of remarkable in terms of movie making, because it does not use many special effects, so such as we are kind of used now when we are watching movies. But the psychological effect, and that's what you were talking about earlier, it's really well depicted in this kind of movies. So it's, as I said, it's an old movie. Its name is Gaslight. So the term gaslighting comes from it. And as for the stories, it follows the young Ingrid Bergman, who plays a young, kind of naive young woman who has been through a very traumatic event in her youth, because her aunt has been murdered in the house she was living in. And years later, she meets a dashing young man. She marries him, and they both decided to live in the house the aunt has left, so her niece, and where the murder actually occurred. But yeah, the events goes for a dramatic turn because the young woman soon begins to doubt her sanity, her mental health. She hears knocking in the wall. She sees the gaslight dim every night. And she begins to really doubt she's sane. Especially since her husband always tells her she's imagining things. She's becoming disconnected with the reality, according to him. And so for her own safety, her own security, he forbids her to go outside. He forbids her to meet her friends. And is telling everyone she's feeling unwell. And I think that's really the mechanism behind the gaslighting. We see in more and more explored in toxic relationships, as you were talking about earlier. The fact that the one person lies to another so repeatedly, and it's such in a confident manner, that the other person becomes totally disconnected from the reality, from what's happening under their eyes. And the fact that the movie also shows that it's a bit of Stockholm syndromes acting in it, because the victims becomes so dependent on the gaslighter, and she's becoming more and more attached to them, and it's a vicious circle, which is more and more difficult to break once. As time passes.
Yeah, it sounds like a really interesting film. I didn't realize that's where the term gaslighting came from, and I've never seen the film, so I'm going to have to watch that because it sounds really good. And yeah, so I kind of from there looked up, okay, so what is the actual definition of gaslighting then? So it's used as a term used to describe a malicious, hidden form of psychological, mental and emotional abuse designed to plant seeds of self-doubt, alter perceptions of reality and manipulate someone into doubting their sanity, which is, like you said, that happens in that film. That's evidently where that recognition of all those things has come from. And actually, I looked up kind of when was this recognized as something that is a crime? Because, like I said earlier, domestic abuse and violence was recognized earlier, whereas this like kind of mental manipulation was not recognized. So in 2015 in the UK, in the Serious Crime Act was changed so that controlling and coercive behavior in relationships could be seen as something criminal. But I am aware, I don't have the statistics to hand, but I'm aware that it's very difficult to prove in a court of law. So it's recognised as a crime, but whether someone is actually able to prove that their partner has been coercively controlling them is a whole other ballgame. But yeah, 2015. So that's only 7 years ago.
I'm not even being surprised by this. Unfortunately, I'm not being surprised. I don't know the Belgian law for this, or else the European law, but yeah, I wouldn't be surprised that it occurred, that the reconnection, the legal reconnection of this occur at the same time.
Yeah.
And as you say, it's certainly very difficult to prove in front of a court, because in the movie, at least, the gaslighter doesn't use physical violence against his victim. So yeah, we can assume that some people do not even need to use a physical violence or abuse in this toxic relationship. Must be very, very difficult to prove before court. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, so abuse covers yes the physical side, but psychological abuse is there as well, and that it doesn't leave physical bruises or injuries that can be photographed by a police officer, but it leaves huge amounts of mental scarring and issues for the person who is left doubting their sanity, questioning themselves, and all that other stuff. So I think that kind of takes us on to what else we wanted to discuss today, which is how we take in those ideas of toxic relationships and gaslighting and how those are recognized in society. How do we explore those in our books, right? So
Indeed. And I know, because I know some of this in your books, because I had the privilege to read it in advance. And I think you depicted very brilliantly several kinds of toxic relationship. I don't want to spoil anyone, of course. And I'm sure we'll do our best to avoid any spoiler. But in any case, I think you depicted different forms of this relationship, whether it's between two persons, whether it's a group exerting pressure on a specific individual, or even the society as a whole against a group of people. So yeah, in my memory, because it has been quite some time before I read it.
You read an early draft, didn't you? Yeah. But yeah, I mean,
several early drafts.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you've read it several times. But yeah, so I mean, I certainly wanted to explore this kind of relationship because it's a young adult fantasy called Awakening, the first in a series called The Commune's Curse. But I personally, whilst I do enjoy a good like romantic relationship in a book, I'm not gonna turn that down. I think that's kind of somewhat overdone in YA fantasy in terms of generally we see a love triangle.
Oh God, don't even speak about it. Oh my God. That was a nightmare some years ago, watching all those love triangles in young adults. Too many of them.
Yeah. We've all read many books with love triangles, but it's something I kind of wanted to avoid, and I thought so there's an element of a romantic relationship in the story for one of the characters, Commander Suleiman, but the relationship is not a healthy one by any stretch, and we kind of throughout the book and then into the later in the series we'll explore it more, but in the first book we learn about this relationship and some of the history of it, and we see kind of his point of view on the relationship, but start to also learn that while he may have certain feelings for this person, those aren't necessarily reciprocated in the way that he would want them to be, and he's not treated in the way that he should be by someone who is a romantic partner. So I would label it a toxic relationship. It certainly, as I was going through the drafts, was something that I felt like should be made more apparent, that actually there was some gaslighting happening in this. So hopefully that comes through in the book. And I felt like it was important to not just have this standard, like a romance, like, yeah, they end up together in the end. I'm not going to say whether they do or not.
No.
Book 3. That would be a spoiler. But it's just something that I wanted to explore. To be, you know, not just a standard romance. I didn't want to do that. I feel like that you can read other books if you want that, but this one is not about having a standard love triangle.
No, I think you resume very well what you have done with this character. I think you offer a fascinating insight into his personal journey from the person he was at the start. When you see him having a very strong feeling for this person, and then when he slowly starts to figure out who he is, what he wants to do and what he don't want to do any longer, and it's fascinating to see how he really stands up for himself in the end. I don't want to say any more because I'm a big fan of this character, as you know.
You are, yeah.
No spoiler, we said.
I think he's your favorite, right?
One of my favorites.
Yeah. So that was kind of one of the relationships in the book. Like Evelyn, who is probably the main character of the 4. We discussed this in the rape culture video. She has a historical sexual assault that impacts upon who she is as a person in this book, and how she behaves and how she feels and all that kind of thing. And I felt like because she had this historical sexual assault, this awful thing that happened, I didn't want to just have like, oh, this is going to be solved by her having a romance with this person, and this is going to make her feel whole as a person again. So you know, I think that can be something of an issue that I have seen in books, that in order for someone to be whole, they have to be in a couple by the end of it. I don't agree with that. I don't think that should be the case. So for her, that this book and later books in the series is about being okay with herself, given this historical issues that she's had and the things that she's been through, basically. So yeah, I think those two are probably the main characters that have had this toxic relationship, or something happened to them that falls within this umbrella. We do have Hector, who has a toxic relationship with what a group of people is, which is where he grew up, his hometown of Nooktown. But that's very much kind of centered in book 2. But again, that is, like you said, it's a group exerting a certain kind of influence over him and causing him trauma from that. But I suppose when you say society as well, that's the whole society that's in the book, like the commune, and they're imposing rule over the kingdom of Septima. They are trying to, I would see them very much as kind of patriarchal, and they're kind of imposing this quite strict rule, and that's again something I want to try and challenge. But it's just, there's so many themes I feel like I could easily want to explore, and it could get way too big, which is why I think I wanted to focus in on like Evelyn and Commander Suleiman having these particular issues and trying to explore them within those characters. So that was why it was important to me. So what about yourself? Like, I know you've got Rose Girls, which we discussed in our rape culture video as well. Was that important for you in terms of kind of the relationships you looked at in that book as you were writing it? What themes were coming to mind for you when you were trying to explore these issues?
I think we have unconsciously, of course, put the same themes in our respective books, because, as you said earlier, that's very important to us. And the fact that you decided for Evelyn not to have a romance, in order not to have a romance, especially to become whole, to become safe, to become, which is a trope we have too much seen in the past in young adult fiction. It speaks very strongly to me as well. And for my current project, which is called Rose Girls, for the summary, you might want to see our earlier video about rape culture. I think I've explored this toxic relationship with several people around her. I've also shown a very patriarchal society, which divides women between the good ones, the rose girls, and the impure ones, the one unmarked, who are sent beyond a wall and left there to rot. Basically, that's that's the main thing you see. That's very nice, as you can see it. For my main character, which is called Abigail, she becomes the victim of a kind of sexual assault. Not to spoil, but yeah, that's becoming obvious at the start of the book. And she wants to be believed about what really happened. And she is questioned by the chief of police of her hometown. And she quickly realizes that the man comes to her not to hear her, not to listen to her, not to believe her, but because he has already a culprit in mind, and that he wants just some evidence to bring against this person. And she is feeling really unwell after their meeting, and she has to figure out why she can't be believed on what she says. And the fact that she is gaslighted, not only by the chief of police, but also by her own family, because they don't believe her. They don't believe because she has suffered a blow on her head. And so what she says happened during the attack she suffered. Is considered as not to be consistent, not to be too current to be believed. So the people close to her, the one she believed she could rely on, are the ones turning against her, or at least not believing her on something so very traumatic for this young girl. So I think that I tried depicting the toxic relationship with our parents and also with the society as a whole through this character of the police, the chief of police in our own tone. Because I think that's really important. And that's unfortunately something happening in reality. When you see victims of sexual or physical assault not being believed by police officer or by authorities. And we talked earlier about the difficulty of proving the gaslighting some people have endured. And I think that was really important to depict, especially in young adult fiction.
I would agree. I think like taking us on to, so why do we feel like this is important for young adult fiction, especially? I found some statistics about young people, especially. So 1 in 3 young people will be in an abusive or unhealthy relationship. And so there's a quote here that says, the tricky question is, what does an unhealthy relationship even look like? And then we come on to the problem of having some very questionable relationships depicted in not just the YA fiction that perhaps we read 10 years ago. There was problematic depictions then, but there is still stuff now that's really popular. It's the stuff that I alluded to in the rape culture video. I'm still not going to name it specifically, but there are Netflix adaptations of these books. If that gives you any kind of clue as to what it is. But the relationships, the relationships are really not good. And it's this, I think you said this in an email to me, it's this idea that the man or the male in the relationship, because it's usually female and male partners, it's usually a heterosexual relationship that we're seeing, the male is kind of damaged in some way, and that somehow is supposed to justify his abusive relationship and his abusive behavior towards his partner. And so because of this damage, is kind of excused and just he's forgiven, and the relationship carries on in this cycle, and they inevitably end up together because they're meant to be together. It's so messed up. And then you think this is very popular amongst this demographic, like teenagers and young people. So how are they then getting the idea of what an unhealthy or what a healthy relationship looks like? And you did mention last time sex education as like a great example of this is what healthy relationships can look like, and you can set these boundaries and you can talk to your partner and explain what is okay and what is not okay and what you like and what you don't like and all this kind of stuff. So sex education remains an excellent example of this is what healthy relationships can look like. But there are
very good series, and you can also mention as you talk about depicting what a toxic relationship is like, especially for young people who do not have any reference to it. I will mention the latest. I think that's the latest Taylor Swift song. I think I saw the movie with this song, and I think it was very powerful to see how this young woman grows into a woman so confident. She has been gaslighted, she has been betrayed by her partner, and how she grows out of it. And to see I won't spoil, and to see the conclusion, which is bittersweet, but at the same time so powerful for girls and women and all people of minorities who have endured this kind of abuse. I think it was a very powerful message to pass through this song. So
I need to watch that. You mentioned it to me, and I just remembered.
You have to watch it.
Playing the baby brain there. I need to watch it.
I know.
Brain like a sieve. So I'll watch that. That sounds really good. And I think it's stuff like Taylor Swift is obviously highly popular and influential. So it's great that artists who are that big are putting out videos like that are showing actually the happy ending doesn't mean you end up with this person despite
Absolutely.
the issues in the relationship. It can mean coming through that, getting out of that relationship, and kind of becoming empowered for who you are, and rebuilding yourself sometimes is what's needed, and rebuilding your confidence when it's been completely shattered down and you're questioning who you are, and you've been through all this kind of abuse and have been made to question yourself and your identity and all these other things. Just having that empowerment can be really, really important. So that sounds like another great example.
Yeah, I think that's a trend we see more and more often in young adult fiction, and I cannot say how much it means to me, because I grew up with, as you say, the toxic tropes.
Yeah.
You fall for the bad boy, you fall for the boy who is messed up, and you hope for a great relationship with him. You end up in a couple with him, and that was the main, I think, that was the main message of this fiction a few years ago. You, as you say, you don't feel warm unless you are in a couple with especially the bad boy or the supernatural creature, who has a very specific secret you have to learn all about. Because the story was not about the young woman, even though she was the narrator. It was about the boy she would end up with. And you mentioned earlier the love triangles, and I think it was I don't have anything about it against love triangle in principle, but it was a trope which was mainly used to develop this kind of stories. And I think we have seen too much of this, and hopefully the trend is being replaced with the empowerment of young people, of saying, okay, you don't have to be in a couple, you don't have to fall in love, you don't have to have sex to become whole as a person. And I think that's very, very important to pass through this fiction.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I, as you were talking there, I kind of got the thought that in a lot of these stories that we read, like the female protagonist, yes, it's told from her point of view, but her story doesn't start until she meets the male, and then like has that insta love, and then that's where the story starts. Like that's her becoming herself because she's fallen in love and met this person, and then inevitably the love triangle is what causes the conflict to try and create a story. And so love triangles can certainly be done well, but the examples I'm thinking of are not good, and are just
definitely
toxic relationships. And so I suppose it's kind of it comes hand in hand really for us as writers of young adult fiction, and the idea that people in that age group can be influenced and kind of swept up by these really popular stories. And you know what, we've all been there. Certainly myself, I remember being swept up by what's popular and you know, falling in love with something, and then looking back on it, I think we said last time, looking back on things 10 years ago, 10, 15 years ago that I'd read or watched, and actually thinking that's not good.
That's very messed up.
But at the time we were like, this is great and this is popular, so I'm going to be really into it. And so it's really important to be aware of, okay, what these things are, what is a toxic relationship, to be aware of that, to be aware of how gaslighting takes form and the impact it has on the person who is being gaslit, and to include that within the stories that we're writing, because it's not that we're saying don't have a toxic relationship in your book and don't ever write this, because these things happen. Personally, for me, I know people sometimes want to read to escape and to be like completely different reality, but for me, I feel like exploring issues like this makes me connect more to a story. If I'm going reading about a character that's going through something like toxic relationship, or they're having mental health struggles or something like that, I feel more connected to them because it is reality for so many people, and I can see similarities to personal experiences, and that's how I enjoy stories. It's not necessarily escapism, it's about how I can connect with these characters. And I feel like the accurate portrayal of all these things, rape culture and toxic relationships and mental health and trauma, is, for me, and I think for you as well, is what really brings you into the story and brings it to life and makes it kind of educational in a way, and helps people to process things that they may have been through, and to say, okay, I'm not the only person that's been through this, and actually maybe I can talk to someone about it. Maybe well, how I'm feeling is okay, and it's okay to feel this way, and I'm not alone, kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. It can give young people and not so young people, because as you say, 10 years ago, there wasn't much talk about this, not as often as now. It can give them a real opportunity to express themselves on what they may have endured, what they may have suffered. And I think, it's really important. And to talk about young adult fiction now, I've come across 2 graphic novels, which I think depict really brilliantly also the kind of toxic relationship we are talking about in this chat. The first one is Laura Dean's Keeps Breaking Up With Me. I think the title says all. When I saw this title at first, I thought, it can get really bad, but it can also get really well. And I read a few reviews about it, and then I bought this book, and I can think, I can say with all confidence that the graphic novel is addressing a very toxic relationship. And for once, it does not concern a straight relationship. It is a relationship between 2 young girls, and one is visibly gaslighting the other. And the personal journey of this young girl who is being emotionally abused by the other is very striking. And as you say, it can give a real opportunity for people to talk about this. And the second one, it's Bloom by, I think, Kevin Panetta and Savannah Canusho. I'm sorry for the accent. I know it's horrible to hear. Where, in fact, the main character slowly realizes it's involved into very toxic friendship. Because, the toxic relationship is not always happening between love interest. It can also happen between friends.
Very true.
And I think that's also a very important topic to address, because friendship at this age are very, very vital, very necessary to young people, and one cannot always spot when a friendship turns toxic. And
Absolutely.
It's addressed in Bloom, thanks to his crush, actually, a very healthy crush, at least, and the main character realizes it's involved into this toxic friendship. We see also how he becomes empowered through his relationship with his crush, which is very, very sweet. So that's definitely 2 recommendations from me.
They both sound really good, because it is about, if you don't know to look out for the signs of these things, then you don't know it's happening. And from personal experience, toxic friendships can be a real issue, and I won't go into detail, but it's certainly something that I kind of had issues with and had no idea until years later. Okay, actually, that's not what a healthy relationship looks like. And I think having these books available, like these graphic novels, and being able to read about, this is a toxic relationship and this is what it looks like, and this may be what's happening to you, helps someone to actually get that self-awareness. Because once you've got the self-awareness, that is always step 1. I always say that to my counseling clients, like, once you've got self-awareness, you can't get rid of it. Like, it's in your brain now, and it may be something that maybe they don't act on straight away, but they can start recognizing things and start thinking, okay, actually, that's not all right, and I don't need to put up with behavior like that. I don't deserve to be treated in that way, and all that kind of thing. it can start as a very small seed, but sometimes that's all it takes.
Yeah, but it takes time. It takes time to recognize the sign. And sometimes you, as you say, you only recognize the sign you were in a very toxic relationship years later, when this person is definitely out of your life, and you say you're being reminded that of all this sign, and you say, oh my God, I should have realized. But as you say, there's no reference frame we can fall upon to recognize this. And
exactly. Yeah,
unfortunately, that's a work in progress for the society as well.
Yeah, it is. You know, like we said at the beginning, this only was recognized in law 2015. There's a long way to go in terms of recognizing that toxic relationships, whether it's a romantic or a friendship or whatever kind of relationship it is, there's still too many depictions in the media, in either like film or TV or books, that say if you love someone, then it's everything will be okay, and that's all you need to get through a relationship. Even if you're screaming at each other, even if you're being made to question who you are as a person or questioning your own sanity or whatever it is, if you love someone, you can fix them, or you can stay with them. And
that trope,
it's not the case. That is not.
No, I think that this trope in particular is sending the message that when you love someone, as you say, you're willing to sacrifice everything you are, or you're dreaming of, just to be the perfect partner for this person. And that's really not okay. But as you say, unfortunately, some media are still sending this message through their fiction, through their books or of movie. And that's definitely something we have to fight against, because that's very damaging for people as a whole.
Yeah, because I think you mentioned something as well in your email about like consent as something that should be recognized, like as one of the ways in which we can avoid problematic depictions, like making sure that we're accurately describing a toxic relationship, showing the consequences of it. And also consent is such a big thing that I think in the last few years people have become more aware of the importance of it. But when you think of like popular kind of big romance films where it's so much like the male will just keep pursuing, because eventually the woman will be like, okay, fine, like that, and then they fall in love and live happily ever after. Like you just keep chipping away at someone, then eventually you'll get them.
We expect her to cave in, actually, to give up and to say, okay, he's the one for me. Gosh. A shiver with disgust.
Exactly. It's I think that we are getting that awareness slowly. It's like we said in the rape culture video, like it's something that people are becoming more and more aware of, but it's like it's really slow creeping awareness. Like it's going to take a while to seep into everything that we
it takes really a great while, I think, to recognize the importance of consent. And I would take just one teeny example to illustrate this. As you say, in romance movie, we have usually this big scene where the man steal a kiss from our partner, because usually it's a straight relationship. And we are expecting this kind of scene, because it's such a great final with the violence in the background, and everything will be well, and happily ever after, and I think this kind of scene, this stolen kiss, is the first, not really the first, but one major step to brush the consent question under the carpet, because it's seen as a romantic gesture, while in truth, you impose something on the other person. it should be considered as a sexual aggression for me. And because it's a romance movie, because we have to see a love story without any obstacle between these two persons, I think the obstacle between each other, not external, not outside the stories. We do not see this kiss as an aggression. We see this kiss as an achievement. But in reality, it's kind of really, really disturbing behavior. And just the question, can I kiss you? It should be compulsory to ask someone, can I kiss you? Can I touch you? And it's as you say, it's slowly, people are slowly becoming aware of this, but it's still meeting some major resistance, I think, from the media, the publisher, or so on. And it's very damaging. It's very unfortunate for me.
It is. Okay, so I mean, if we kind of wrap up then about what can we do
already?
We've kind of already
talked so much about it.
already answered this question in a way, but like, what can we do in like depicting toxic relationships in our books? How can we avoid problematic depictions? I think we've already touched upon this, but what would your conclusion be there for you? What is it that you're doing that's avoiding problematic depictions?
I think my conclusion will be a bit or much identical to yours, in the fact that instead of blindly depicting relationships in the same way mainstream media and culture have shown us through their stories, the movies, their books, we should challenge and question every aspect of our relationship and what is a healthy relationship. So for instance, does it respect each other's wishes? Does it show any imbalance, any power play between partners? I think it should be done, whether you depict straight, queer, or relationship between two persons or between more people, because polyamorous relationship exists too. Even though we rarely see them in a healthy context, of course. But we should take care that each party is feeling respected, that the question of consent and well-being are put on the foreground, and that each party is listened to by the others. I think that's really a vital aspect of our work. And we have this kind of responsibility as writers, I think, especially for young people. And I think you are on you do share this opinion.
I'm on the same page, absolutely. Like it's not about, like we said earlier, it's not about not depicting these kind of relationships. It's about knowing how damaging it can be to depict this kind of relationship and say this is okay, and you can fix someone if they're like this to you, and you can live with them and have a happy ever after, and it's everything will be fine and dandy. Absolutely depict these kinds of relationships, because I think that can be helpful to people who are going through it, but be aware of what the consequences are, be aware of what's healthy and what's unhealthy in a relationship, and question why you would feel the need to have like a toxic relationship, why for yourself, if you think it's okay to use that and it's okay for that to be happening in a relationship. Actually, you need to take a step back and get some self-awareness around that, and actually educate yourself on what's okay in a relationship. Because you know what, for someone, I'm 32, and this is only something I've become aware of in the past few years. I think it unfortunately is not something that we're educated about as a rule of thumb. And sometimes it can be about having to go and educate yourself, and then depicting it accurately in your book. And it's as simple as that, I think. Like, gaining awareness and putting it across in what you're writing, and not putting in things that can be damaging to what is, you know, whoever reads your book, whether it is teenagers or young people, whether it's adults, because a lot of adults read young adult fiction,
of course. Yeah.
And I think anyone who reads a book can be influenced by it. It doesn't matter your age. So yeah, I would say reading up around this kind of thing and getting as much education on it as you can is kind of the number one thing that a writer can do.
Yeah, and as you say, we should spread awareness of this, but we should also, I think, in order to do this, reach out to people who have been abused, who have endured these kind of things, and we should definitely listen to them, because as we say before in the discussion about rape culture, it's about believing and listening to the victims.
Yeah.
And as you say, it's vital for becoming educated on this very topic.
Absolutely. Yep, that's a great place to finish it. Yeah. listen to people's stories. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you, Cindy. It's been another great chat.
It's been my pleasure, really.
And so, like I said, we'll put the link for the rape culture video below this one. And thank you.
And don't forget, Lucy's book is out in 4 months, and let's all pre-order it. I've done so yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Our pre-order is for this, and it's called the Awakening. Yeah.
It is. Thank you very much, Cindy. Yeah, it's out on the 1st of May. Thank you.
Pleasure.